achieved none of the objectives it set itself 15 months ago. It set itself the objective of collapsing Hamas. Hamas is still very, very much a fighting force, and it's in control of Gaza. The sight of Hamas in pristine Toyota Jeeps and new uniforms delivering the 3 hostages in the middle of Gaza City shocked the Israeli public, who'd been fed a diet of news saying that Hamas had been collapsed. Here they were, back again, emerging like ghosts from the rubble, being cheered by the crowds, in control after 15 months of total war. And it said to themselves, what the hell's been going on? Why have over 400 of our soldiers died for so-called total victory over Hamas, when we can see before our eyes that the Hamas fighters have got pristine new uniforms and are in total control of Gaza? In fact, Hamas was recruiting at a faster rate than Israel could kill its fighters, acknowledged by Israel's own generals. It set itself the task of returning all of the 250-some hostages that Hamas captured. And most of the hostages that did die, died at the hands of Israel's own bombs. The only way of getting these hostages out alive would be a deal with Hamas. So on all of those objectives, Israel has failed. And let's be absolutely clear about this. The main obstacle to an agreement with the ceasefire was not Hamas, it was not the Qataris or the Egyptians. It was not the Americans, not even the Israeli High Command. The terms of the agreement are very much what Netanyahu could have agreed to months earlier. Why didn't he do that? Well, because I think he wanted to keep his extremist ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, in the cabinet, and also because the Israeli public believed in his propaganda that the best way of getting the hostages back alive was to pound Hamas. Of course, the exact opposite is the truth. It's much easier to say what Israel has lost in the 15-month war. And apart from national unity and national cohesion, I mean, if you think about it, this is the first time in Israel's history that there have been virulent and active demonstrations against the war while a war was itself in operation. So there's all that going on inside Israel, but outside Israel, Israel has lost decades of diplomacy, of pressure, and of lobbying in Washington to paint itself as the good guy in the Middle East, surrounded by irrational Arab alien forces. It itself has lost a generation of American Jews. 40% of American teenagers support Hamas. 66% of American Jewish teenagers believe in the Palestinian cause. They are seeing this conflict through the prism of the last 15 months in Gaza. Now, this point was made by Biden's departing ambassador, Jack Lew, who had not uttered a word of criticism to what was going on in Gaza throughout his very troubled tenure as ambassador. But his parting shot to Israel was, you've lost a generation of American supporters, and these are the future leaders of the country. That is a very significant loss. You've also got Israel in the dock of world opinion. Now, Trump will just ignore the ICC or try and collapse that as well, but it's still in the dock for genocide, and it's still in the dock for war crimes. And there are warrants out for the arrest of Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, and there are a myriad of court actions taking place in courts around the world which are tied and allied to that. There's a court action against BP for supplying the oil that the Israeli military use, and there are many other cases. In fact, the Israeli army got so worried by the idea that their citizens could be arrested on holiday that they've now taken a great deal of action to disguise the identity of the officers who took part and who bragged about the killing field in Gaza on social media. I mean, there are basically 2 different wars that are being fought. Israel is fighting a Western kinetic war aimed at eradicating the leadership of a militant group that is fighting them, in the hope that once that leadership goes, then the fighters lose all discipline and all control and they give up. And also in maximizing collateral damage, in terrorizing the population as a whole to make sure that they pay the maximum price for supporting Hamas or for allowing Hamas to continue. The other war that is being fought is a much, much longer term war, which has become a battle of wills. It's not that Palestinian fighters think that they can win any engagement against a vastly superior military force. But what they can do is wear their enemy down. And by keeping on fighting one generation after another, that eventually Israel will be forced to negotiate with the Palestinians as equal citizens on equal terms. And this historically is the story of the liberation of Algeria. It's the story of Vietnam. It took 6 more years for the Americans to withdraw after the Tet Offensive, which, like the Hamas attack on October the 7th, was deemed at the time to be a military failure, but which started a ball rolling that kept on rolling until America had enough and pulled out. America wasn't defeated militarily in Vietnam. It lost the will to fight it. The French forces lost the will to stay in Algeria, even though at one point it regarded Algeria as an intrinsic part of France. So in the long run, the historical signs do not look good for Israel. In the short term, they can win every single confrontation with maximum damage, but Gaza showed that the people can resist that and still survive and still be able to reconstruct from the ruins. Gaza looks like Hiroshima because, in a sense, it is Hiroshima. Actually, it's 2 Hiroshimas within the first month. Israel has dropped more bombs on Gaza than America did on Iraq in 7 years of war, and more bombs than the Allies dropped in the firestorms in Germany in the whole of the Second War. That's the amount of firepower that was used against an enclave which was entirely cut off from the rest of the world and being starved. And still, it didn't break Gaza's will, despite everything that was thrown at Gaza in 15 months. The bombs, the starvation, disease, everything that they endured. Total destruction, over 80% of their housing. We've never seen figures like this. And we're still only coming to terms with the contours of the scale of the destruction because we haven't toured Gaza from north to south. That's still only just happening as we speak. As the decayed bodies are being lifted from the rubble, the death toll will rise and rise and rise. The Lancet says there are 3 times as many dead bodies as have been claimed by the Palestinian Health Authority, which the mainstream media dismissed as Hamas run. In fact, it was undercounting the death toll, not, as Israel and the Western media would have it, overcounting it, undercounting it by 1/3. Gaza has shown that the human spirit will prevail and that despite everything that was chucked on it, it will not surrender, it will not wave a white flag, and it will march towards its right for a homeland, for equal rights, and for self-determination and sovereignty. Everything that Israel demands in its place is deserved by the Palestinians. And after the destruction of Gaza, no one in the world can argue that the Palestinians don't deserve their own state. Now that the ceasefire appears to be sticking in Gaza, you guys could